you can always sense like a more spiritual aspect to certain people in their journey.
Yeah.
And I just, it made me really curious about your story. Um, I felt like you were the kind of dude that if I met in real life, we would just get along and have a really
Yeah.
good conversation. So here we
Yeah.
are.
All right, let's do it.
So, man, I'm going to start with a few questions and vice
Sure.
versa. If you have any questions for me, I'm an open book. But yeah, man. So it's funny how suffering oftentimes leads us to a degree of enlightenment, whether physically, mentally, or spiritually. And it sounds like you just went through a whole lot of shit, a whole lot of suffering. Um, did those illnesses that you experienced, I think one of them was like Lyme disease, did they all just like kind of surface out of nowhere?
Yeah, totally. So basically 2013, I began to feel really, really unwell in like a 2 week period of time. Before that, I never really experienced any dramatic pain. Like I went through a lot of stuff as a kid, but I didn't actually experience it as painful in my body or in my psyche. I never had any sort of collapse of identity, up until that point, 2013. So yeah, in a 2 week period of time, I began to have severe mental disturbance, like psychological mental disturbance. I mean, my my voice split off into five, six different voices. And so I would be sitting there and my normal narration was changing. And it was like, wow, whose voice is that? That is such a foreign feeling in my body, in my mind. Um, and so, yeah, I began to have panic attacks because of that, depression, anxiety. I no longer knew who I was, right? The Josh that I thought I knew just started melting away. And that spiraled way out of control to the point where I was having panic attacks all day, every day. My life was just one big panic attack, um, and couldn't function, couldn't work. Yeah, my life went downhill fast. And I mean, suicidal is not even a word that would be appropriate here. I wanted to die every hour of the day, like I wasn't planning up until the very end. I wasn't planning that, but I did not want to be alive. And it was painful for me to get from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God, dude, man, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I can relate to so much of that. It's so wild. When you realize, yeah, you have almost like different entities living inside of you, and
Yeah.
they're all kind of fighting each other for the forefront, for to take over identity
Yeah.
almost. And then when you become hyper aware of those things, and your whole existence feels chaotic, I can only imagine, because if you were going through that and in the midst of that season you started taking ayahuasca, I
Yeah.
can only imagine the kinds of things that you were confronted with.
For sure, and you mentioned entities, and I think there are different parts of ourselves and our psyche, and when we repress things, they get very loud and almost take the shape of an entity. And I think, and I know there are also real entities. There are also real noxious energies that can infiltrate our being. And that was part of my journey as well. And that's a
Mm,
whole other conversation, but there are for sure, noxious energies that can affect our consciousness. And a lot of times it's just repressed stuff that can take the shape of almost a demon, if you will.
right. And knowing the
Yeah.
difference is very
Yeah,
difficult. Um,
very difficult and important. Yeah.
there's a video I posted, and it was of a high dose mushroom trip. And basically, these voices started taking over. And I fortunately had audio recorded and I turned it into like a YouTube video just to kind of put it out there, just to kind of give people a glimpse that there's so much more beneath the surface than they might realize.
Yeah.
And when these entities were almost like being channeling, they had like accents and like weird stuff. One of them
Yeah.
sounded like a demon. And
Yeah.
as time has gone on and I've sat with that stuff longer, like in very deep meditation, some of those things have surfaced. And then that made me realize, oh, this isn't bullshit. This isn't just like, oh, he took drugs and this thing happened, because it continued to happen. And then I started to almost make friends with different sides of myself. And I realized that some of the more scary ones were actually like extremely scared and wounded parts of me from the past
Yeah.
that had turned into very, very dense shadows. And when I looked at it, it was like something out of a horror movie. It was like horror, like just terrifying, because I would even close my eyes and almost like hallucinate and see things. But then as I started to actually, instead of running from it, go deeper into it and actually like show love to it, as counterintuitive as that might be, I almost watched it transform into this like scary demon, into just like a lost little child.
Yeah.
I'm like, holy
Yeah.
shit. Like, and when you have objective spiritual experiences like that, dude, it changes your whole life. Like you can't, it's almost like a form of breaking out of the matrix. When you see these different layers, it's hard to just only see things through the realm of the physical at that point.
Yes.
And that's why when I stumbled upon your content, I was like, this guy's been through some shit.
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
like we need to talk.
Yeah, yeah. The ayahuasca, that was a whole phase of my journey. I after basically I flushed all the medications down the toilet. Once I learned about ayahuasca, I saw a National Geographic article. I think I saw Aubrey Marcus podcast, and I just said, fuck this Western route. Like this isn't taking me anywhere. This does not feel like the right path for me. And then I went to the Amazon, and on 3 separate trips, I drank like 32 times, and all of the demonic forces, all the things that you talk about. I mean, I had to face that stuff every single day. Right? It was a daily boot camp of facing my shadows and facing myself and my fears. And, I think that we actually don't know how much pain we have because we are in a society that constantly masks pain. So even if you're a real true spiritual seeker, even if you mean well for yourself, if you have a cell phone, you don't know how much pain you really have, because that cell phone, it takes you, it externalizes your consciousness. It takes you out of yourself, and it prevents you from really facing the shadows. So when you just dropping the cell phone or just living in the Amazon jungle without even ayahuasca, there's stuff that you have to look at and confront, and you have no choice. You either leave the jungle or you look at it, right? Because you can't, when you don't have distractions, you can't lie to yourself, right? It just becomes impossible to lie to yourself. So
That's
yeah,
the ticket,
ayahuasca.
man. That's
Yeah.
the ticket. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, ayahuasca was a big, big experience. I think it's not for everyone, but it was a big experience. Yeah.
That's what I always say. I say psychedelics are a tool, and they're absolutely not for everyone. But
Yeah.
for me, it showed me initially what was a little bit beyond the veil of the
Mm.
physical. And I needed that because I came from a very strong religious background. And then when I realized a lot of the stuff I was being taught was bullshit, I went in the other extreme of like atheism. And dude, the suffering I felt when I was purely in the physical and nihilism, where I'm like, this is
Yeah.
it. This is all we have.
Yeah.
I might as well just extract as much pleasure as I can, even at the cost of other people. There was that very strong feeling of separation. And then for whatever reason, man, mushrooms just called to me. It was like the
Yeah.
thought I couldn't get out of my mind. And I was like, well, it's illegal. They're illegal drugs. And then they just kind of found their way to me. I wasn't seeking it. It was almost like my higher self or God was just like, here you go.
Yeah.
And it found its way
Yeah.
to me. And then once I've experienced that feeling of oneness and the veil of the physical went down for a second, then after that, I was like, oh, okay. Like it's not that the spiritual realm isn't real. It's just the religion that I was caught in was full of manipulation and lies and ulterior motives. And I couldn't see the love behind what those teachings were originally made to show us. And
Yeah.
so then, yeah, and then going down
So
the
you
journey,
associated the metaphysical with manipulation, right? Or
yeah,
with bullshit. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And then the path started where my mind could finally start to understand and accept what my heart already knew. Um, and that just opened things for me, And so
Yeah.
I'm very grateful at this season of my life. And that's why even the YouTube channel started. It's like there's a lot of self-improvement stuff out there geared towards men. And a lot of guys, like you said, they don't even know what they're feeling, because men specifically, they don't know how to intuitively go within and feel things, like in solitude and heal. And I feel like women are a lot better at that. I think that that's
Yes.
why men are like, women are so dramatic. It's like, dude, they're just feeling everything now so it
Yeah.
doesn't accumulate.
Yeah.
and they don't end up with all this density. And men are just awful. And I have the theory that that's why the suicide rate is so high for men. It's 80%.
Yeah. I have a joke on that, which is not even a joke, but basically I take men through a retreat called the Spirit of a Man. And at the end of the retreat, what I say is, congratulations, you now have the intuition of a normal woman. You know, like the retreat is teaching intuition. It's
uh,
teaching them how to get in touch with themselves. And it's like, all right, now you're at the level of a standard average, borderline numb woman, you know?
I love that, man. That's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
Oh, dude. Like,
Yeah.
and so my motive, man, even with the channel, there's certain
Yeah.
videos, like I filmed one last night, and it's about kind of what we're talking about. And I'm like, as I'm like packaging the video, I think the title is literally going to be like, listen, bitch, like just kind of like tough masculine. But then when they go into it, there's like this like loving, intuitive
Yeah.
energy. And so I'm trying to almost like trick dudes
Yeah.
into like,
Yeah.
trying to bait them with the masculine self-improvement package, but then just
Yeah.
kind of do the bait and switch and be like, here's some intuitive love to help you
And
heal.
you know what? As you say that, I think that men don't understand the benefit of being sensitive and in tune with themselves. So they would label it as like, well, that's bullshit, or that's not going to improve my life, or like, why would I want to do that? I think when men get the why, they're more willing to like actually participate in that sort of work. But what I want to say the why is that like it's bullshit to be an alpha all the time. Like it's just absolutely not possible. Where our skin gets penetrated. If there's a knife, right? The knife requires 3 pounds of pressure to penetrate our skin. We're vulnerable. You can get hit by a car tomorrow. If you love someone, if you have a kid, you're vulnerable. If you have a wife that you love, you're vulnerable because you have a part of your heart walking outside of yourself that anything can happen at any point in time. So there's
Yeah.
this massive vulnerability to life that we don't look at as men, and we attempt to become this like alpha machismo perfect character dominating life, but it's not connected to humanity or reality whatsoever. So eventually that will fail, and eventually that will get ripped out from underneath someone in some way, a death, a sickness, some sort of calamity will force a man to look at himself in a real way. And so all of that is to say that, like, you know, being in touch with our feelings, being in touch with reality, it makes life more fruitful. It makes life more connected. It makes life, we have deeper experiences, richer experiences. If you're in that alpha character all the time, there's nothing deep or rich about your life. You're just making money, and maybe you're screwing a lot of women. Like there's a lack of connection. And I work with billionaires. I work with
Yeah.
entrepreneurs have hundreds of millions of dollars. And what they do is they basically will try and pay that money to try and get love and experience. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And that's what they want. Once they accumulate all that wealth, it's like, oh, now how do I be a human again? But guess what? You can't buy your way to that. Money
Yeah.
doesn't buy you that, you
Yeah.
know? And so that's not to say we don't want to be rich and crush life, but like,
Yeah.
I share this concept that Samuel Sagan talked about, which is astral and etheric. It's
Mm.
basically you have this etheric life, which is your animal body and your internal well-being, your emotions, your immediate surroundings, right? And then you have this astral life, which is digital, your YouTube channel. It's this broadcasting in this internet era. And you don't want to just have one or the other. We want to have both, right? We want to be big in the world, impacting the world, but we want to also remember our humanity and our heart and our emotions and like our just our immediate surroundings and love.
Mm.
So it's really the pursuit of both of those things. Neither is right or wrong, but how do we
Yeah.
have both? Right. And I think
Yeah.
men get fixated on just the astral success, and
Mm.
to have this avatar in the world that like that there's some superhero, and it's
Yeah.
bullshit. It's bullshit.
Just extremes in general. Because then on the other end, it's like people, they vilify things like money, they vilify things like external success, and those things are fine. And it's a matter of integrating, both sides. And that's why I was,
Yeah.
attracted to speaking to you, because you strike me as an integrated person. Because it's just like, I noticed because you had the jujitsu background, I saw the cauliflower
Yeah.
ear and all that stuff. I'm like, this is a guy that you wouldn't want to fuck with. But I also feel like he also is in touch with his feminine side as
Yeah.
well and can move from a place of love. It's like we do need both. We need to learn
Yeah.
how to integrate those things. And a big flaw in the spiritual community I have found is they vilify the external. They vilify money and things like that. And it's just
Yes.
like, um, I don't really, I've never bought into that. And then on the opposite end, like I said, the masculine self-improvement space also makes me cringe because I just see like this wounded kid behind their eyes because they're
Yes.
like, you're a little bitch and you need to blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I'm not judging them, but it's like, bro, they talk to themselves that way, and it's
Exactly.
just like, and so they are actually trying to help people. They're telling guys what they would tell their younger selves, but there's a whole um, realm that they don't might not even know exists yet, and that's why there's an element I feel like of um, race, if you will, that those mushrooms kind of found their way to me and kind of bust that door wide open to where I could see it. Because then once I recognized the divine, then I was like, oh, like this is the missing element. Now I can have this and pursue the external. And the external is kind of like the icing on the cake. It's there to be enjoyed, but it's not the cake itself.
Yes.
And now I feel, just a lot more whole, a lot more integrated. My day to day, the results that I do get or don't get, don't make me feel small or really stoked. Either way, I'm kind of more level. Um, and that's the power of
Yeah.
like spirituality. But oftentimes we need to go through suffering, unfortunately, to get to that place.
For sure. And what you just said reminded me of the sort of, let's call it the Andrew Tates of the world, right? Like the masculine sort of teachings in that way. It really is better than being a victim. Like I think it is better to be in that machismo, like let's crush life, like don't be a pussy. That's better than being a victim, but it's
Yeah.
still not integrated and it's still a compensation. Like I've trained with some elite fighters. I was jiu-jitsu world champion and I've trained with UFC fighters. I fought UFC fighters in jiu-jitsu. And what I found, like when all was said and done in the locker room, because I also wrestled, all of these like toughest men, they were badass, no doubt, but they were also in a constant reaction to not being weak. Like their whole identity was like, I'm not weak. I'm not weak. And that was like a seesaw. It was like at some point in their life, like they thought they were weak. And then this whole thing comes on top of it, which is like, I'm not fucking weak. I'm a beast. And that feels like you'd feel like that's sovereignty, right? It's like this is one of the toughest people on the planet. That should be sovereignty. They're actually a slave to not being a pussy. That's they're just a slave to not being a pussy. If they just
Dude,
looked at right, if they just looked at like, well, maybe I am weak somewhere. Maybe I really
yeah.
am a weak in a couple different arenas. Then they don't need that compensation. Maybe they wouldn't be as successful either, right? In the sport, because it does require a little bit of insanity to be that successful in fighting, right? But when I saw it and I took a eagle eye view, I was like, wait a minute, this is not freedom. Like that's not freedom, even if they're the toughest SOB on the planet, you know?
Mm. Wow, dude.
Yeah.
So well articulated. And that's another
Yeah.
thing I want to say, man. You've got a gift. You've
Thank
really, I
you.
can tell you've cultivated. You always tell people that have spent time in suffering and time alone with themselves, and also time learning how to wield language, because that
Yeah.
is such an obstacle. For most of my life, I had all these profound thoughts and emotions, and I just couldn't really articulate it. And it's like then when I just slowed down, started reading, started writing, started, going within a lot more, then the articulation started to surface and make more sense where I could communicate these things. But you're a
Yeah.
fantastic communicator.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Yeah, man. So
Can
I
I
don't know
can
if
I teach
anyone's
a
ever
trick
told you
about
that.
that so others can do the same
Sure,
thing?
sure.
All
Yeah,
right.
let's go.
All
Yeah.
right. So in every moment, there is the part of you that is assessing how you sound or how others view you. And there's a part of you who has a rhythm and a flow and a drum beat and a song inside that has something to say in some eloquent way. Everyone has that instrument inside. I mean, some people's instrument is more maybe dirty or filthy with toxins and emotions, and they don't really have access to their true notes yet. But when you clean the instrument and you find that instrument, there's always that nagging voice of how do I sound and how is this coming across? If you can learn to choose your own rhythm, your own drum beat, your own song inside, it's going to sound epic.
Dude.
All people just care about authenticity. They don't care if you sound smart. They don't care if you know the science. They don't care if you know the facts. If you come from that authentic, raw place, you're
Yeah.
already 10 steps ahead of everyone else. Right. So that's my trick. You know, it's like that voice, I just tell it to go fuck itself. Right?
Yeah, speak from the heart, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why the car chats can be magical because you're
Yeah.
driving, you can almost kind of separate your brain and just kind of like riff. And I noticed that when I started doing that, my talks without driving got way better because I was like kind of tapping
Yeah.
into that. And man, there's something very even deeply spiritual about it, you know. And I think
For
certain
sure.
people, even like Andrew Tate, I don't know how aware of spirituality he is or isn't. He says he believes in God, blah blah blah. But I feel like if he had like a an intense spiritual experience and the divine was just like, you're enough
Oh,
as you are, he
yeah.
would just collapse and start
Yeah.
weeping like a child, and it would
100%.
change everything. So I don't think he's had that experience,
Yeah.
but whether he knows it or not, he is tapping into something spiritual when he gets into that rhythm, whether
For
the
sure.
messaging is of a higher vibration or not. He definitely has got that tapped in.
For
um,
sure.
and yeah, you can always tell when people have that. But man, I've never heard anyone explain it that way before.
Yeah.
That's really cool. One
Yeah.
thing I want to note too, perfect YouTube title. Would you say like, are you a slave to, what was it? A slave to not being a pussy?
Yeah. Yes. That
That's
could
a
be
great
the
YouTube title.
video.
You're a
Yeah.
slave to not being a pussy.
Yeah. A lot of men are. Yeah.
That's amazing, dude. All right. Something I wanted to touch on.
Sure.
Let's see how much time we have here. Keep it out of time. Tell me about these worms that I
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
have.
Yeah. So, I've coached people for years on parasites, heavy metals, toxins. I think that it's a massive problem. I would not just say not worms only, but toxins in general.
Yeah.
This is my work, is basically helping people clear their physical vessel. So over time, especially if you live in North America, but really everywhere in the world, but North America is the worst, we accrue toxins, heavy metals, plastics, chemicals, the products we use in our bathroom, in our laundry room, in our kitchen, they're all synthesized chemicals. And in fact, there's over 88,000 chemicals that are allowed to be used in these products that have not been tested on
Yeah.
humans. And so
Jeez.
what happens, and this is why I was sick, is that over time, we just bioaccumulate this toxicity. For me, it was mercury and Lyme disease, and that caused severe leaky gut. And so I was just my physical vessel was in shambles, and all the spiritual work couldn't stick. I couldn't get the lessons from ayahuasca. I couldn't integrate things into my nervous system because my physical vessel was so jacked up.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, 8 out of 10, maybe 9 out of 10 of my clients will release physical, visible worms, rope worms,
Wow.
mealworms, tapeworms. I used to think it was just an Africa thing. It's very much like an everywhere thing. When you clean this vessel, I mean, Gianni's done it. He's on this call. When you clean this vessel, it changes a lot. It changes.
Wow.
I'm not going to say it's like, in my marketing, maybe I'll say it's a magic bullet, but like and just real man to man, it's a game changer. It's an absolute game changer. The way I would equate it is, you know, if you're a boat, toxins are like an anchor keeping you stuck where you are. You cut away the anchor, which is the toxins, but you still have to navigate this ship, right? You always have to choose love. You always have to choose light. You have to choose integrity, choose to be honest with yourself. And so that never changes, but it makes life a lot easier when you're not
Mm.
toxic. All of this confusion and agony and all these layers of bullshit that people have to go through to find themselves. I find that when we cleanse this vehicle, it's just so much easier. And the hallucinogens do land
Mm.
very differently when you detox. It's much more of a pure experience versus like um, a morphed experience. Like for me, the metals in my brain morphed the spirit of ayahuasca, and I couldn't get the true message.
That's
we're,
incredible.
we're an
Yeah.
antenna, right? We're an
Hmm.
antenna of consciousness. And if the antenna is dirty, then you can't get the right station. And so you may be on the wrong station and you're going to be personalizing that. You're going to be like, I'm a bad person, or like, but you're actually just, you're connected to the wrong frequency. You're in the wrong zone.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily something personal that you need to change about yourself. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it does make
Yeah.
sense. And yeah, man, you're a pro at this stuff because it always starts with trying to heal yourself, and then once you do, then you're like, okay, and I can show other people how to heal. So you've made, your pain your purpose. And
Yes.
that's
Yes.
a huge call of humanity in general. And more people I've noticed are tapping into that. Um, I was fortunate. I grew up in a pretty health conscious family. My dad was a chiropractor, and he was into like Eastern ideas and medicine, things like that. And like I grew up, with a reverse osmosis water filter in the
There you
house. And
go.
this is like in the late '90s, early 2000s. Like
There
this
you
stuff was
go.
like super niche. Like no one
Yeah.
was talking about this stuff. And so
Yeah.
fortunately, I grew up drinking, good water and things like that. My parents were, into vitamins and tried to reduce the amount of like additives and
Yeah.
we ate organic foods and things like that. Um, I wonder too because there seems to be like anything, there's an extreme. So sometimes I wonder about like talking to you, for instance, you have so much knowledge of so many things that a lot of people are like unaware of. I feel like we could go really deep, and by the end of it, I could just have like intense hypochondria and be
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
"Oh
Yeah.
fuck!" Like,
Yeah.
there's so much wrong
Yeah.
with me, and there
Yeah.
probably are things wrong with me that I'm not aware of. And then on the opposite end, there's people that are just like, "Oh, they throw their hands in the air and like, I don't give a shit."
Yeah.
I think maybe that's where like intuition kind of comes in too for the individual. Like certain people who they're suffering and they know that they're suffering, they feel kind of trapped in their own body and like there's something blocking them. Um, really like getting in touch with that intuition, that kind of like shows you, and then they probably find their way to someone like you, who can like lead them down those paths. The worm thing is wild just because it's
Yeah.
like imagining because it's almost like something out of a science fiction horror movie. It's something I've never thought of. If someone's like, hey, we could deworm you, and at the end of it I could show you these visible
Yeah.
creatures that have been living in your body and stealing your nutrients. Like that's horrifying.
Yeah. It's horrifying at first when you first hear about it. For me, it's like, it's like, what's for lunch? It's like the same conversation, or how's the weather? It's like, it's
Right.
so part of humanity, and so not a big deal. And there's no fear, but to answer your point, which is a very important one, if you're in naivety, that's probably better than being in fear. So if you just don't know what's going on and you're just like living, like I probably think that's better than like being in a hypochondriac or being like, oh fuck, the chemical is gonna kill me or the air is toxic. Like that. I'd rather be naive.
Because then you make yourself more sick.
You make yourself more
you
sick. Your
know
nervous
yeah,
system is jacked
yeah,
up. If anytime you're at war, if you're at war with life, or if you're not safe, you have no chance of like being like healthy,
yeah,
right? Like
right,
it's the number one prerequisite for health is safety, right?
yeah,
And and so, but there is a way to do it when you begin to navigate gracefully and you begin to learn how you can replace all of these toxic chemicals with just plant-based alternatives. And you do everything from a place of grounded love and care for yourself and not fear. And then it becomes a no-brainer. Like, oh, of course I'm going to buy the organic apple versus the non-organic, or of course I'm going to get the plant-based cleanser for my body versus the Tide laundry detergent that has 85 chemicals in it, right? There's just these choices, these micro choices that you get to make that don't affect your life negatively whatsoever. Um,
yeah,
and yeah, there are still people, even in my courses, who are in a chronic state of fear. And no matter what I tell them, that's how they do their life, right?
yeah,
And so
yeah,
that's how they make their choices, and how they learn is just through this incessant fear. And I would say that's more, it's more, to do with that individual versus the process of detoxing.
right, yeah. No, that makes sense,
Yeah.
man. And all
Yeah.
those micro decisions, yeah, that's how it is in anything in life. Just starting small,
Small.
It's just like,
Yeah.
okay, what are little adjustments that I can make? And then before you know it, you make all those adjustments, and then you want to go even deeper. You're like, okay, what
Yeah.
micro adjustments am I missing? Um, where I can go deeper. And then, it's like you're the guy. It's like you can take them down the rabbit trail, and because you've been through like all of it.
Yeah. And Samuel Sagan, he's the founder of the Clair Vision School. He's inspires me a lot. He's dead now, but he's an inspiration for me. He says the warrior, a warrior of love, is able to choose the difficult path, because you can always say how everything is fucked. You can just be like the chemtrails and the toxins and the parasites, and it's all fucked, and our culture, and we're losing our masculinity. You can just be like, it's all fucked, right? And you can close. The real warrior says it's all fucked and let's do this. Right. And that's how you go through the detox journey. It's like, yeah, it's all fucked. There's toxins everywhere. Let's do this thing. Right? Like, how do we win? Right?
Yeah,
How do we
yeah.
clean ourselves? Right?
I love
No
that.
fear.
It's
Yeah.
it's all fucked and
It's all fucked. And what's for breakfast? Let's do this.
yeah.
Right?
No, I
Yeah.
love that, dude. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a good energy. That's good
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
I see here.
Because
All
it is
right.
kind of all fucked, if you ask me. But
I know, man.
yeah.
I know. But
Yeah.
and that's the thing. Some of those spiritual awakenings and spiritual experiences I've had, I'm just like happy to be here.
Yeah.
Even in the midst of all the darkness and all the pain, because all that allows the contrast
Yes.
of the
Yes. Well
beauty,
said.
that's
Well
why
said.
it's here, and so it's when I was in nihilism, I couldn't see that. It was just everything sucks, so I might as well. Now it's just like a
Yes.
lot of things suck, but man, it just when beauty makes itself known, it is undeniable. When love
Yeah.
makes itself known, it is undeniable,
I
and
love
just
that.
kind of bringing that presence to your day to day and to your work. Um, I feel like that's kind of where we're aligned, because I
Love it.
really sensed
Yeah.
that as soon as I started watching some of your content, I was like, yes,
Yeah.
like I see what he's doing. I get it,
Yeah. Love to hear it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very enjoyable. So
Yeah.
you're married, right?
Correct.
That's
Yes.
awesome. How long have you been married?
2 years.
Cool. I
Yeah.
also love that, man, because I have found that relationships are like such a mirror for our own growth. And that's another thing in the men's self-improvement space. It's all about volume of women. It's all about the opposite of the work that it takes to cultivate a long-lasting, loving relationship. And to
Yeah.
me, that takes a degree of strength and grounded masculinity to go down that path. And so many people reject that.
Yeah. Yeah. I would love to talk all about that. You know, I at one phase of my journey, I was trying to be with as many women as possible, right? And I felt this sense of power, like a claiming energy, right? And for some men, that might be an appropriate edge for them if they need to find confidence, or if they need to, that might be the proper path for some people at a juncture, right? Eventually, I realized that the hardest thing for me to do was to actually open and be vulnerable. Like it became easy to claim. And once it became easy to claim, it was no longer my appropriate masculine edge. And this is David Data talk, right? Like every man has a masculine edge that they're going to need to surf for their whole life. And the spirit of the work is to find the true edge, not your mental, not what you want with your mind, right? Like it's not Andrew Tate's edge anymore to go screw, or like Dan Blazarian, right? It's not his edge anymore to go screw 8 women in a day anymore. That's not, it's actually his edge to cry, right? And that's
Mm,
actually would be the hardest, most valuable thing he could possibly do, is like feel what he's running away from, or, and it's not to judge him in any way, right? But
yeah.
the point is that at some point, if we really want to face ourselves, I believe monogamy is the ticket to that development. I did polyamory, and what I realized is like whenever I got bored or whenever I got tired or annoyed, I would just go to the next shiny thing. And the positive thing is that, yeah, you get to have excitement all the time. The negative thing is that you're not actually peeling the layers of the onion. Like, why are you bored? What can you do about it? Can you sit in the tension? Can you choose love even if 99% of you wants to eject out of your body because you're so frustrated or in pain? Can you choose love? And so I believe that that fortifies something in our consciousness and that makes us more trustable, more valuable, more better in business. It makes us a sharper sword when we're able to choose love despite all of our shit coming up. And when you're polyamorous, your shit doesn't come up. I mean, maybe it does, like jealousy, right? Jealousy could come up.
Yes.
And right, that can come up big
Yeah.
time. And I have a whole philosophy on that if we want to get into whatever. But the point is, like, relationship, as you said, it's a ticket to enlightenment and to knowledge of self. And it's very, very potent work. Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
God, so well worded. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, this dude, at the end of the day, the main work of humanity is stuff comes to the surface and you make a conscious decision to courageously go into it and look at it. And bit by bit, pattern by pattern, you begin to heal those different parts of yourself. And the more parts of those of the self that become healed, the more your true essence can come forth.
Yes.
And then that's when you transition from, oh, I'm chronically trying to heal myself, which is actually a good place to be at. It takes self-awareness. It takes some degree of spiritual realization to do that to begin with. But when you start to get on the other side of it, then that's when you start to point other people towards their own healing. And dude, relationships, yeah, they can be they can be like the fast track to that almost if you're willing to face it and do the work. Because it is so true, man. Mirror, like it's such a mirror when you're with someone and they trigger you, and then to, in that moment be like, okay, I'm triggered. They did this thing that's unreasonable. But if I look deeper, there's this wounded child that has had abandonment or something, and it's coming to the surface, and it hurts so fucking much to look at it. But I know that I'm being called by something higher to sit with this. I'm just gonna go play video games.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then that's what happens. So people, they kind of like, they'll go down the trail of when they're like slowly like, okay, but then they eject.
100%. And, I think you can't, my philosophy is you can't really have free will until you do everything that you just said, until you actually look at your material, until you move through the triggers. You're not operating from free will. You're in a reaction to your wounds. So you can be super aggravated with one of your partners. And if you're polyamorous, you'll just eject there and go to somewhere else, right? And so that's not the deepest level of free will. Now, you don't have to choose your partner for life because you're dating them. That's the opposite, like dogma, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like, let's say one end of the spectrum is like you're hopping around because you can't face yourself. And then the other end would be like, I sign away my life to this woman, no matter what, at all costs, right? What about a processing, a metabolizing, and a allowing of really facing your shit, but knowing when to walk away when it's not helpful anymore, right? That's the
Yeah.
magic zone right there. You're actually looking at your stuff, but you're not devoted from dogma, you know?
Yeah, dude, I'm so glad you brought up that
Yeah.
dichotomy because in my youth, I succumbed to that. I was, raised, like I said, in religion. And when I was married before, I'm divorced. And when I got married, man, it was all my religious friends around me were getting married. Premarital sex was this sinful thing. And it was just like, I did it all from that place of like, well, we've been dating for this long. And like the next natural step is to do this thing. And that was the opposite extreme. That was the opposite extreme. I wasn't really listening to my heart. Even in that moment, I was moving from a place of fear of not fitting in or being alone or whatever it was. So it all comes back to self-awareness and consciousness at the end of the day. And it's different for every individual.
And choice, right? Choice.
Yeah.
Through choice. Yeah.
So real quick, we've got about
Yeah.
20 minutes left. I just want to
Sure.
let the guys know if you guys want to start raising your hands and start thinking about if you have a question. And if you ask a question, I just ask that it's very concise, just that way we can just get to the root of the question, answer it quickly. Because yeah, we've got 20 minutes and I want to respect Josh's time. But yeah, Josh, is there before I start calling on folks with questions, is there anything else that you wanted to add or anything like that, or any?
Um, Let's go with the guys. Yeah, let's
All
go.
right, let's do it, baby.
Yeah.
All right, Bene, go ahead, brother. Let me make sure. Hold on, give me a second here.
What do you
Okay,
use?
cool. There we go. Cool.
Hello. Man, first of all, this has been awesome. Honestly, this has been so fun to listen to. I'm tired as fuck because I went on a huge hike today, but this was so worth it to come to this.
Yeah.
Um, I actually had a question on this last topic of relationships and like the edge, right? I know a lot of stuff about David that I actually kind of coach men on relationships. And I'm 22. I've only been with one woman my whole life. Just it happened like that. No religious background, no nothing like that, right? And I'm still with her. We've been dating for like 5.5 years now. And now I'm wondering, like, I'm kind of comfortable in that relationship, right? Yeah, everything's going well. Of course, there are struggles here and there, normal for a relationship, right? But I've never really been with other women. And I maybe don't want to go down that route, but still I'm wondering, like you gave me that thought of like, am I really at my edge right now? Right?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Tricky, right? Tricky. So I could never give advice, right? Because of your specific situation, but what I would say is that my experience is that it's very, very, very hard for a man to know himself in his 20s. I think it's impossible, but I don't want to say that as a fact. I just think it's really fucking hard. I've gone through my 20s. I saw how many women I was like, this is it. This is the answer. I'm marrying this woman. Like this woman is, and then literally somehow 3 or 6 months later, that was like a distant memory. Like once I broke up with her, it was like a distant memory. And my new life was so intoxicating and true for me. And I was like, how could I have ever married that woman? That would have been a huge mistake. And so I do think that I can't speak for every man in his 20s, but I think that's what the 20s are all about. That being said, you might be mature enough where it's just like you're solid and you just know that this is a woman that you're going to be with for the long haul, right? You could be in that situation. It's rare, but it's definitely possible. And, um, I just, it's always an exploration of like, is this making me better? Is this helping me with my goals? This as in this relationship, this woman, this dynamic. And another thing is that it's not always about should I break up or not. A lot of times it's about how can I push the edge in the relationship and see if she matches me at that next destination. That's how I always like to test things in life. Instead of am I in or am I out? I'm in, but I'm in here at this next level game that I need for my development as a man. And if they choose it, let's keep going. And if they don't choose it, I know from God that I need to drop it. Right.
Woo!
Yeah.
Sorry, dude. That's just fire, man. So
Yeah.
well articulated.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. I don't even know what I just said. I blacked out. Yeah. So yeah, that would be my vision. And the
Yeah,
20s are
that's
tough.
awesome.
The 20s are tough because we love, right? Like if you're a good man, you're going to love deeply and you're going to want to care for the woman and you're going to want to the thought of breaking up with a woman at that age when you love her for that many years, it's devastating because I think probably a lot of us feel like we're almost their parents or something, or like we take care of them, in some way when we're young. And so and you want to make sure that's not the thing that's keeping you together,
Mm,
That's what I would look at.
got it. Thank you
Yeah,
so much, man. That was
for
that
sure.
was so much value there.
For
I'll
sure. Yeah.
reflect on that for hours. Thank you so much.
100%. Yeah,
Love
100%.
it.
Yeah.
All right, we've got 15 minutes left. So, any questions? Just try to get to them quickly. Go ahead, Pedro.
Oh, Gianni was first, though. I don't know if you want me to
No,
go
you go
or
ahead, buddy. Yeah, you're good.
just a quick question. I mean, it's such an honor, by the way, to talk to you. I
Yeah.
remember you from Imagatsili 4 years ago, so it's actually crazy that this is a possibility.
Yeah.
Just to get to the point, I just want to ask you a question about biohacking. If you would recommend any books to start going down this route and just no information.
I've learned most of my stuff from the internet, not from books. When it comes to health, spirituality, I has amazing books, but for health, Ben Greenfield is a great resource. Very, very arrogant man, but very good resource. Okay. Um, Dave Asprey, obviously, right? But you know, you're just going to probably get more and more confused. Honestly, not to toot my own horn here, I have an $80 course that's fucking amazing that teaches all about this. If you want to invest in that, it's called the 14-day detox blueprint. And that's really amazing. So yeah, I would say water, right? Changing your water, changing your food, lectin avoidance diet, bringing in the core essential supplements that 99% of people need, like iodine, glutathione, liposomal vitamin C, and what else would be essential? Spirulina, chlorella, you know, it's
How
tough
does
to,
your
yeah, go ahead.
can I ask you? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
It's okay.
How does your course work? It's $80. If I can
Well, it's
ask?
just I just teach people how to detox in 14 days. It's a 14-day cleanse. You buy supplements, and I don't want to pitch it on this video. That's not my intentions here. I hope you guys know that. But it's just, to put it short, it's a 2-week course where you cleanse your diet, you know, you take in the right water, you learn about the best supplements, and you clean the colon of old mucoid plaque. You have to invest several $100s in supplements from different places, Amazon and iHerb. But it's a really, really good start to the detox journey. That's why I created it, to start the journey.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. I'll look into it.
Yeah, and then sorry, let me just give you a little bit more of a thorough answer. Ben Greenfield, Dave Asprey, there's who else is
Yeah,
really
I got the 6 books from Dave Asprey. I'm kind of very like going
yeah.
down the information route.
Let me if you go to my Instagram and you look at who I follow, it's, you know, it's safe to say that I value their health opinion if I follow them. So you can check that out.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I love it, man. And I will say, all the guys in here, please check out his detox course. Like, he knows his stuff. He's been going down this path for a long time. So definitely check that out. Go ahead, Johnny.
Yeah, so I actually have a question for the former world champ jiu-jitsu guy in you.
All right.
I have my first competition coming up tomorrow, so
Okay.
I'd like some tips or tricks or some preparement or anything that could help me claim victory.
All right. I love it. I love it. There's one thing that completely changed my life in terms of jiu-jitsu, and I would say changed my life in general. I used to have so much anxiety going into a competition, and the anxiety took me from a star to like a beginner. Like, even though my skills were incredible, my anxiety, my fear of losing, my fear of letting like my father down, or, you know, if he was at the match, like I would be debilitated with fear. And so my coach, when I was 23, he came up to me and he taught me a breathing technique, and it was just box breathing. And it was literally, it was 7 seconds in, 5-second hold, 7 seconds out, 5-second hold. And he said, no matter what, just keep breathing before your match. Like, whatever your thoughts are, whatever you got going on, just go back to your breath. And I would do that for hours. Like, I would just literally, as soon as I would go into thoughts, I would come back to my breath. And when I learned that technique, I won the world championships that day in 2010. He taught me that technique that day, right? I won the Pan Ams a year later. I won the Abu Dhabi trials a year after that. It was all uphill. I got better and better from that, but I always used that technique in my jiu-jitsu tournaments. So it's in for 7. And if you're very anxious, you won't even be able to do that because you'll be so shallow breathed. So you just you calm yourself down until you can get there. Being calm is the best thing you can be for a jiu-jitsu fight. You will always perform better versus being really hyped up. And also sweating before the fight. Like, if you sweat a lot before the fight, it's much better than breaking a sweat in your first fight.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic, man. Yeah, it's really cultivating presence and focus.
Yeah.
I love
for
that.
Sure.
Let's see here. All right. Real quick, there was a question that a guy had, one of the members of the community Ben, he couldn't make it. And you might have already answered, but his question essentially was, what would be like the number one thing of someone who, if someone's suffering from just chronic illness? I know it's very general because I guess it depends on the illness. Um, you know, what would it be? Because I feel like some things too, or even just a lot of people, Americans especially, they're just carrying around like a lot of body fat in general.
Mhm.
So sometimes just going into a deficit for a first time or fasting. Like, what are your thoughts in terms of how most people seem to be suffering with some kind of chronic illness these days?
Yeah, I don't think there's one solution. I think it's really has to be a holistic approach with the
Yeah.
water and the food and the supplements and the lifestyle and the mentality and
Yeah.
self-love. It's just so complex. But let's just say if there was one thing, it would be self-love.
Mm.
Self-love. And to put that simply, every single morning when you brush your teeth, look at yourself in the eyes for me, I brush my teeth for like 1 minute, right? You probably should do longer, but just look at yourself in the eyes for that 1 minute in the mirror and say, I love you, right? For
Dude,
1 minute.
it's
If you can't do
yeah.
it for 1 minute, you got problems, right? You got bigger problems. Yeah.
You're the second guest, man, to come on here and say that. And it's funny because that's a practice that I actually did for years. At the end of my videos, I always say this thing where I'm say you're loved, you matter, and you barely scratch the surface of what you're capable of. People don't realize for years and years before I made this channel, I was doing that shit in the mirror with tears in my eyes,
Yeah.
just learning how to cultivate that deep love that wasn't bullshit. It was literally God loving me through myself.
100%.
And when you start to do that, guys, like, you don't be surprised when certain illnesses, certain conditions that you had just sort of like fall off, because you'd be surprised what manifests in your physical body when you need like a deep spiritual and emotional healing.
100%. Yes.
Yeah, man, I love that. Well, cool. Let's see if there's any other questions here. Go ahead, Jem. We've got about 8 minutes left.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you. It was amazing. And I have two questions.
Yeah.
One of them is about health. So there is a yogic cleansing method called Shanka Prakshalana. Do you know that?
Yep.
Okay, I'm wondering what are your thoughts about that? For those who don't know, it's a really harsh cleansing. You drink lukewarm water with salt and it's cleans everything, like your guts, intestines, and you basically shit water. So like it's a harsh cleaning. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I do it once every 2 months. Right? I've been doing it for 7 years. I love it. I also love the Kunjal Kriya, where you vomit the salt water as well. So you can drink salt water, and if you don't vomit it, you'll have diarrhea and cleanse your intestines. Or you can do a strategy where you keep drinking until you actually vomit it out, and that kind of cleanses both channels. So yeah, both are amazing. What I would say is that how can I teach this best? I would actually say to go to this YouTube video of mine if you want to learn how to do it, because it's tough to teach in a quick couple of minutes. But let me get you guys the link.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have a general idea of the title of the video too, in case someone wants to just like search it?
Yeah, so it's called Nature's Miracle Constipation Saltwater Flush, and it's
Awesome.
6 years ago, and that's how you would do a saltwater flush rectally, like to cleanse the intestines. But then the Kunjal Kriya, I don't have a video on. You'd have to Google that, Kunjal Kriya, and all of the techniques are virtually identical. It's like 1 to 2 tablespoons of clean sea salt or pink salt. You never use table salt for this. Never, ever use table salt in general. And then you'd mix it in, about 32 to 40 ounces of warm water, and you drink that over the course of about 2-3 minutes, and then you vomit it up. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And my second question is about business. So I have a few online courses, a training for men, and I just started a new community. And my main followers are on Instagram. I just started a YouTube channel and I'm dealing everything by myself. I don't have a team and it's kind of frustrating. And I would love to have some advice. What, like, about time management, about investments, like should I invest on ads or should I invest on to create a team and go to the YouTube game
Yeah.
full course? Like, yeah, when is a good time to create a team and how?
Yeah. I would do what Ryan's doing, right? With YouTube. YouTube is the best platform to start a business. If you, from what Ryan's doing right now, the world is a possibility. He can choose to do anything he wants with his YouTube following that he's gaining right now. That's freedom, right? It's you gain trust. You have people watching you for hours and hours and hours. And once you have that trust, and once you develop that core audience and that core subject, building a business is snapping your fingers. You just decide that you're going to collect money for it. You literally just decide, right? And that's it. It's done, right? So that's where I want to be right now too, because my YouTube got shadow banned, so I can't really. So I do Instagram, but I'm going to make a new YouTube channel, and I've been inspired by Ryan, and I'm going to do the same stuff as him, making this raw, authentic content. Maybe some in the car, some like that's gold right there. Yeah.
Because the ROI too with those kinds of videos is very high because it doesn't take much to make those. Also check out Bene's YouTube channel. He's just churning out car videos left and right. And literally in like a month, I think it's been like a month, he's gained like 300 followers, you know? And so it's just like, it can be frustrating, but it is a long game. Just being consistent and leading with authenticity and leading with your heart. Because at the end of the day, if you start being something you're not, then the algorithm will bring the wrong people to you and it's hard to sustain. So just be completely authentic and genuine from the start. So that way, when you do gain followers, you're not playing a character.
Yes, 100%. And the best piece of advice I could give, which is that in different words, is everyone is always looking for how you relate to yourself. So you can't fool anyone on a YouTube video because everyone is a master at understanding how someone relates to themselves. And when you put yourself out there, it's so revealed how you relate to yourself, even if you don't think it is. Even if you don't think it is, you're just naked. You're naked, and people can see idiosyncrasies and things about you. And so what protects you is your truth and your honesty. Once you start getting away from your truth and your honesty, you're going to get ripped apart. And it's also, it's just going to be painful. So it's how you relate to yourself is how people are attracted to you or not. Not if you're some sort of perfect guru or you know everything about health or everything about relationships. You don't have to be an expert to make money. You just have to be real and authentic and like trustable and one step ahead of the people who are watching you. And you can make a full living. Like I was making an incredible living and I quit my job at Whole Foods, but I was a complete rookie. I was a total rookie, but at Detox, but I still was able to make a living in the very beginning because I was honest. I was just honest and real. So that would be my advice as well.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right, guys, so much value, man, in this call. Thank you so much. I can't believe we squeezed everything in an hour. We did it, man. And what I'll do, Josh, I'll send you, this call is recorded. I'll send it to you in case you want to repurpose it for any content on your end.
Yeah.
And man, anything else you'd like to add?
I will say that my best self came out today. And so that's a statement as to your interview skills and to your audience. So my best self doesn't always come out on interviews, but today it did.
Awesome, man. Easy. You feel like a brother, dude. If ever there's anything I do for you as well, just feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
So rock and roll.
Okay.
All right, guys.
Ciao, everyone.
Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.